The soft knock at the door startled me. It was nearly dusk, and I had just settled on the couch, lost in the comforting monotony of a book. For a second, I debated ignoring it, thinking it might be someone trying to sell something. But the knock came again, firmer this time, yet hesitant, as if whoever was behind the door wasn't entirely sure they should be there. I slipped off the couch and opened the door, surprised to find Mr. Everett standing there. He was a familiar figure in the neighborhood, kind, calm, and always a picture of discipline. At 60, he looked at least a decade younger, with his tall, lean frame and silver-streaked hair. His eyes were a sharp gray, a stark contrast to the gentle aura he exuded. "Mr. Everett," I said, my voice lifting in surprise. "Hi. Is everything okay?" He hesitated, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his light jacket. His gaze lingered on the threshold, not quite meeting mine. "Evening, Lily," he said, his voice soft and steady. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Of course not." I stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. It felt strange, seeing him so hesitant. Usually, he was the epitome of confidence, offering waves and kind words to everyone he passed on his morning walks. He entered, pausing just inside the doorway, and I closed the door behind him. The air felt charged with something unspoken. "Would you like some tea? Coffee?" I offered, more out of habit than anything. He shook his head. "No, thank you. I won't take up much of your time." "Take your time," I said, trying to smile. "You're always welcome here." For a moment, he looked as though he might turn back, but then he sighed and stepped further into the room. He stood awkwardly in the middle of my small living room, his presence suddenly making the space feel even smaller. "I don't know how to say this," he began, his voice low, almost apologetic. "And I've been debating whether I should say it at all." I frowned, unsure of what to make of this strange preamble. "Whatever it is, just say it. I won't bite." He chuckled faintly, but there was no humor in it. Finally, he looked at me, his gray eyes heavy with something I couldn't quite place, something raw, vulnerable. "Lily," he said, "I'm lonely." The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. I stared at him, unsure of how to respond. "I've been alone for a long time now," he continued, his gaze steady but his voice trembling slightly. "Since Elaine, since the accident." I nodded slowly, remembering the stories I'd heard about his wife, how she'd died in a plane crash years ago. He rarely spoke about her, but everyone in the neighborhood knew the pain he carried. "My kids are all grown," he said. "They live abroad now, busy with their own lives. I'm happy for them, of course, but," he trailed off, his hands fidgeting at his sides. I felt a pang of sympathy for him. Despite his strong, composed exterior, it was clear he was hurting. "I don't know why I came here tonight," he admitted. I couldn't sit in that house any longer." I stepped closer to him, unsure of what to say. "You don't have to be alone," I said finally. "You have people here who care about you." He looked at me, and there was something in his eyes, something that made my heart skip a beat. "Do I?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question caught me off guard. Before I could respond, he took a cautious step toward me. "You're kind, Lily," he said. "You remind me what it's like to feel alive." My breath hitched, and I took a step back, bumping into the edge of the couch. The air between us felt electric, charged with a tension I didn't know how to navigate. "Mr. Everett," I began, but my voice faltered. James, he corrected gently. Please, call me James. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. This was the man I had looked up to, admired from a distance for his strength and wisdom. I had always thought of him as untouchable, a pillar of the community. But now, standing so close to him, I saw something else, something deeply human. I'm sorry, he said, stepping back suddenly. This was a mistake. No, I said quickly, surprising myself. It's not. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of hope and doubt. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, he said. You're not, I said, though my voice wavered slightly. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, the silence stretching between us. Finally, I gestured toward the couch. Sit, I said. Let's talk. He hesitated, then nodded and sat down. I joined him, keeping a careful distance, though the air between us still felt charged. For the next hour, we talked. He told me about his wife, about the life they'd built together and the emptiness he'd felt since losing her. I listened, my heart aching for him, and found myself sharing pieces of my own life, my struggles as a student, my fears about the future. Somewhere along the way, the distance between us disappeared. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly I was sitting closer to him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. His hand brushed against mine, and I didn't pull away. When he finally spoke again, his voice was soft. You're special, Lily, he said. You're kind, and smart, and beautiful. I don't know what I'm doing here, but I know I don't want to be anywhere else. His words sent a shiver down my spine. My heart was racing, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to tell him to leave, to put an end to whatever this was before it went any further. But another part of me, the part that had always admired him, that felt drawn to his quiet strength, didn't want him to go. James, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He reached out, his hand cupping my cheek, and I felt myself leaning into his touch. I should go, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Stay, I whispered. And just like that, the world seemed to shift. James's hand lingered on my cheek, his touch both gentle and sure. My heart pounded as I stared into his eyes, unable to look away. The world outside seemed to fall away, leaving just the two of us in the dim light of my living room. When his lips finally met mine, it wasn't hurried or desperate. It was soft, searching, as if he was afraid of pushing too far. I responded instinctively, tilting my head to deepen the kiss, surprising even myself. He pulled back slightly, searching my face for any sign of hesitation. Are you sure? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, though my nerves buzzed with uncertainty. I wasn't entirely sure what I was doing, but I didn't want to stop. There was something about him, his calmness, his quiet strength, that made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt before. He stood then, offering me his hand. Come here, he said, his tone soft but commanding. I hesitated, my mind racing. Was this a mistake? Was I just a placeholder for the loneliness he carried? But when I met his gaze, I saw no ulterior motive, no desperation. Just a man who had been adrift for too long and found a fleeting anchor in me. I took his hand. He led me to the couch, sitting down and pulling me gently onto his lap. The moment felt surreal, like something out of a dream. His hands rested on my hips, steady and firm, while mine hovered uncertainly over his shoulders. "You can relax," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I'm not going to hurt you." I let out a shaky laugh, the tension in my body easing slightly. "I know," I said. "It's just, this is new for me." His expression softened. "For me too," he admitted. "In a way." He kissed me again, this time with more confidence, his hands moving up to cradle my face. I felt myself melting into him, the warmth of his body grounding me. There was no rush, no urgency, just an aching tenderness that left me breathless. When we finally broke apart, he looked at me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Lily," he said, his voice low and steady, "if you want me to stop, just say the word." I shook my head. "Don't stop," I whispered. What followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. James was patient, attentive, taking his time to explore every inch of me. There was a reverence in the way he touched me, as if he was rediscovering something he thought he had lost forever. And for me, it was an awakening. With James, there was no fumbling or rushing, no awkwardness or uncertainty. He read my body like a map, responding to every movement, every sigh. It was intoxicating, and I found myself completely lost in him. We were by now stripped to our undergarments. I could clearly see his banana pointing like a gun. James in one swift move untangled the strap of my bra and set my oranges free. He cupped them carefully, blowing warm air on their tips. I had never felt this much pleasure with anyone. My world flipped over. I became a mortar under his pestle. It lasted a good 15 minutes that felt like an eternity. He poured his water in the latex. It was over. We lay tangled together on the couch, our breathing slow and steady. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the floorboards. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His arm was draped around me, holding me close, and I felt a strange sense of contentment. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay." He kissed the top of my head, his lips lingering there for a moment. "You're incredible," he said. I smiled, though my mind was already racing. What did this mean? Was this a one-time thing, or was there something more between us? As if sensing my thoughts, James spoke again. "I don't know what comes next," he said. "But I want you to know that this wasn't just a distraction for me. You're not just a way to fill the loneliness." I looked up at him, searching his face for any hint of insincerity. But all I saw was honesty. "I believe you," I said. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair away from my face. "Good." We lay there for a while longer, neither of us speaking. The weight of what had just happened hung heavy in the air, but it wasn't unpleasant. If anything, it felt right. Eventually, James stirred, glancing at the clock on the wall. "I should go," he said reluctantly. I nodded, though part of me didn't want him to leave. "Will I see you tomorrow?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "If you want me to." "I do," I said, my voice firm. He kissed me one last time before he left, and as I watched him walk out the door, I felt a strange mixture of emotions, excitement, confusion, and a lingering sense of possibility. The future was uncertain, but for now, I was content to live in the moment. Whatever came next, we would face it together. Please like and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this.